Good to see you, Bill.
And mutual.
How you been keeping?
I've been doing fairly well. Fairly well. Yep. You?
Yeah, no complaints. Yeah, it's going to be a better summer than last summer. Not so busy. More writing time. This is good. Yeah.
And the road to the valley is open now.
Yes.
As opposed to,
yeah.
yes.
Hopefully we won't go through that again this year. God, that was horrible. Yeah. It's like being cut off from the rest of the world. And if you had anything you had to get to, you had to do the long way around, which was like 3 hours on logging roads. And I never did do that way. I just said, forget it. I'll wait and go later. Yeah. But yeah, the rain we got today will help anyway. We got a good dousing here. So hopefully it'll keep the fires down. Okay, I think we're just about ready to go. Yeah, Karl is getting settled.
That's a relief.
Yeah, me settled. That should be a story in itself. Such a Mermaid, Emcee Dare Hanebury is a Port Alberni writer of poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction who taught writing here at North Island College for many years. His new book, Something Else is Out, Altogether, is out.
All right, thank you, Karl, and welcome everybody. Good evening. Back at another episode of the Electric Mermaid here live at Char's Landing and out there on Zoom land. Good to see all your smiling faces out there. We're missing a couple of people that are off doing a tour in Alberta, right? Peter Paul Van Camp and Mark are over there slaying it, I'm sure. So we've got a smaller crowd here in Char's tonight, but I'm sure they'll trickle in as the evening goes on. And we're going to have a good time as always. Lots of different eclectic reading going on. And we've got Karen Hofmann here, an old friend of Char's, has come back, and an old colleague of mine, actually. We crossed paths at articulation meetings back in the day when we both taught creative writing at different colleges. So it's good to see Karen Hofmann here. And just starting off with a big thank you to Char for hosting us here at Char's Landing. Thank you, Char. And we're, of course, on the unceded territory of the Sishat and the Hepetcheseth First Nations here, and we're grateful to them and their ancestors for sharing their land with us, putting up with us settlers. And yeah, thank you to Karl, of course, for lining everybody up. And I think we've got everybody signed up on the list. We did a little last-minute juggling. And we're just going to jump right in here and get started. Our first reader is going to be Bill Engleson, coming back to us from Denman Island. We're so glad to have you back, Bill. And we miss you when you're gone, and always look forward to what you had to read, because it was always compelling. And I've been following you on Facebook. I'm not stalking you. I just check in now and then and read your poems. Enjoy them, and the commentary that often accompanies them is great too. So anyway, the floor is yours, Bill. Have at it.
Okay. Well, before I do, I'd just like to show this book. I don't know if you can see it. It's the History of the Comox Valley Writers Society, the 60th anniversary edition. And Terry James, an ex-president and a very excellent writer, put it together. And it's a fine little history of 60 years of the group working. But tonight, I was going to read from Small Seasons. Cumberland, a prolific writer in Cumberland, Kim Bannerman, decided to edit a collection of stories, essays about wild spaces in the Comox Valley. And so I'm generally an introvert inside kind of guy, but I did manage to come up with something, and I called it It's the Blackberries, a poetic blackberry bramble. And it starts off, there's an essay that it's fully in trench there, and there's about 4 poems that I've written over the last 40, 50 years about blackberries. So I'll start with the first one. I won't read the whole essay, but so the first blackberry, it was called Blackberry Days. They are those shimmeringly sweaty late summer days when the juicy blackberries are ripe for picking. The patch is across a quiet street from the auto court, an empty, bushy, wooded area. The thorny perimeter presents an imposing, impaling challenge. The first pickers approach with consummate caution, plucking the most accessible line of succulent fruit with lobster-like claws. They work the outside, ever aware of the wasps buzzing in wait, aware of the blackberry thorns spoiling for the blood of careless children. Berries pile up in the plastic buckets. The better berries are soon beyond reach. Planks and black-stained clothes, and, if fully prepared, a machete to clear trail, draws the berry pickers further into the dense patch, further out of sight of home. Trampled cul-de-sacs result as the pickers go in as far as they dare. They fill their plastic pails and eat even more. The sweet blackberry juice and seeds dribbles down the sides of their mouths. Their tongues lick their lips and wash the juice away. The sun burns hard in the late afternoon, and there is little shade deep in the prickly patch. Far off, mothers' supper voices float in the air over the bristly, steamy patch. The blackberry pickers take the buckets of black fruit and amble on home. Anyways, after much searching, I lived in the Lower Mainland for a long time, and finally settled on Denman in 2001. And for close to a decade, I imbibed blackberries and apparently didn't write another blackberry poem until this one. First Blackberries, 2013. I'll never learn. I venture into the patch with thin t-shirt, jeans, and sandals, thinking I can outreach, outsmart, outdress the prickly berry. I come out of the expedition the worse for wear, bloodied, buried, bowed. The best berries are always closest to the sun, high, out of my reach. And moving along, after quite some time, I wandered again into the dark blackberry poetic turf called Picking Blackberries. I do it every year. Well, how big-headed of me. I stand back, muse, languish up the hill in my comfortable roost, and simply watch and weary of the rampaging blackberry octopus, snaking, snarling, tangling, unfettered, triumphing in the diminishing open space. My little garden under pincer attack, my field constricting as the prickly armada of wild blackberry bushes plunder along their bloodied way. I am undeterred. Nonchalantly, I insinuate my bulbously lanky frame between the firm, shark-twined jaws of tendrils flicking, swooping, skulking through the air like porcupine snakes, intent on withdrawing my blood, yearning for my skin. I am so unprepared in shorts and sandals to do otherwise, to wear protective garb, long-sleeve shirts, pants, socks, goggles, helmet, gloves, bulletproof vest. I will not yield to the vicious, juicy weed. And finally, a final blackberry poem came to life not that long ago. I think it spelt kibosh on my engagement with the blackberry beast in the swelling wilderness of the land upon which it flourishes. Crawling. In spring, when I first deliberate how and when to tackle the cascading clump of blackberries, which spent winter gathering force, sleeping and scheming, plotting to spread their onslaught in air, wheedling through the open space, the feeble fence, skirting the vegetable patch, edged by an ever smaller footpath that leads to the raspberry plants we deposited more deeply in the scrub the first summer we were here, and then promptly forgot. I forgot, she notes, because the blackberry snakes crawled dense and menacingly sharp, straggly, sinister, onto the path left unattended, one thin trail, really, which hugs our simple deer fence. I am tempted to let them have their way, their unshackled, invasive way. Why should I slice and sever their thick, smothering strands? Perhaps they have earned their reach, their freedom. And that would be it.
Beautiful. Thanks for that, Bill. My theory is that if you trace the blackberry roots back far enough, they all come from one mother somewhere in Saskatchewan. I know they're possible.
Well,
to
if
get-
Karl actually makes it to Saskatchewan, maybe he can check.
All right. All right. Thanks for that, Bill. So good to have you back reading with us. Please come again.
Right.
All right. Okay, we're gonna go to my old hometown of Lennon, Ontario, and Jennifer Wenn's there waiting with some more poetry in the wings. Good evening, Jen. How are you?
Good, Derek. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Very well indeed.
Good. I appreciate the time shift and flexibility. I have to duck out quickly, but this gets me in time.
Good, good.
So was it Victoria that got bumped back? So my
Yeah,
apologies.
she's infinitely flexible.
Oh, well, that's good. Sec. I need to get the right glasses on. Two bird poems. The first is from the book Here
Here
Through the
silence. Beautiful.
And this comes from a vacation in 1988. St. Lucian Parrot. Highland Rainforest hike in 88, Marshall leading past scenic views, past an Arcadia perverted to charcoal pits and into the salvaged remains, greeting orchids and banana pods, meeting a local heading for a backcountry cockfight, cradling his winged warrior, wielding his broadstick, skirting frankincense, orange, tangerine, and deemed worthy, we detour down across a stream and up, dodging roots and vines deeper, almost to the huge fig, and finally below the dead giant, cradling new life above, to wait and wait. And there, in the distance, parents circling, landing, stealing in by indirection, warily scanning for predators. We watch, silent, till a riot of colors swoops in, green back and wings, dark blue and yellow tail, maroon mottled breast, blue face, red neck. Defiant survivors in a tiny, hard-won enclave, still insisting on their place. Time flowing on, ushered away from the little family by sensitive mimosa, cocoa pods, cinnamon trees, a St. Lucian oriole, past grandmother's summer cottage and the cockfight in full squawk, our spirit still back in the deep forest where Marshall's pride and joy nurtures and rebuilds. That's the first one.
Beautiful.
And there weren't many left. They're doing okay. They were down below 100, but they're hanging in there better, I think, the last time I looked.
Mm.
The next one is from this is actually quite new. It's from another set of bird poems for a future book called Avian Allegories. And this particular one is Whippoorwill. You are the unseen, hidden deep in camouflage while most strut their hours on the world stage. You only emerge as dusk's curtain falls to glide and swoop and sweep up unwary insects. A nocturnal omen, some said, maybe of death, but perhaps of transformation, and all unseen except as a shadow dancing through moonlight, but not unheard, for between sorties you fill the stillness with untiring plain song, your own name over and over and over, once a common night serenade, now rare. I heard you just once, long ago, bedded down in the cottage's now disused attic, only for you to call out of the dark, on and on, stirring my toddler fascination. For I heard an urgent importuning in a language understood not by intellect, but by intuition. A flash of magic that rang out only then, and passed into ancient memory once lost, yet found afresh a lifetime later. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jen. Evocative as always. Love
Thanks very
those
much.
images. And already I see the theme emerging. You're going into the brambles there, you know, those the blackberries from Bill's reading, you know, they're coming through, and we'll see
There always is a theme somehow.
every time. And I've got one about a bird encounter as well. So there you go. The synchronicities begin. Anyway, thanks for that, Jen. And good luck on whatever you're going out to later on.
Thank you very much.
Okay, take care. All right, it's time for our feature. We're coming back to the live in-house here now at Char's, and Karen Hofmann, as I mentioned earlier, is waiting in the wings here with her, brought along her 4 novels. She's going to share some out of each of them with us. And as I mentioned earlier, Karen taught at what became Thompson Rivers University. It began as a college. For almost 30 years, kind of like myself, we had parallel careers, you know, survived teaching and raising families at the same time. We were commiserating about how crazy that was. But prolific now. She's got 4 books out. She had a book, started with a book of poetry that was shortlisted for the Dorothy Livesay Prize, and I'm delighted to introduce her tonight, and really looking forward to what she has to share. And of course, she's brought some books along for those here in house, and we'll put something in the chat about where others can get a hold of a copy from right from New West Press, I guess, or wherever. So without further ado, let's welcome Karen Hofmann to the stage. Come on up, Karen, share some work. I'll warn you, Karen, this mic, you've got to get close to.
Close in. Like
Yeah.
this. Is this good? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I thought I'd start by reading a little bit from my first novel, which was published 10 years ago now, after Alice. And this is a novel that's set in the sort of central Okanagan Valley where I grew up and where our host Char also grew up. So I think Char and I can't remember a time when we didn't know each other. So we go back that far. So this novel is starts in the 1940s, and so it spans several decades. And when I wrote it, I was just trying to capture that sense of a place that's known for orcharding, but also for the lake and lots of immigrant communities and social hierarchies, all those great things of the 40s and 50s, right?
Let me just check with Zoom to make sure they're hearing everything okay
Are
out
you
there,
hearing?
Karen.
Yeah.
We got a thumbs up? Yeah. Okay. We're good.
Okay,
We're
good.
good. All right. Thank you.
So I thought I'd start off just by reading a little bit for this book for Char tonight. All right. They swim in the little bay next to the pier and pilings and great red hulk of the packing house. The camp road, if you follow it to the hill's crest, past the reservoir and down again, zigzags in hairpin turns down the steep slope to the lake. The hillside between the orchards is dotted with ponderosa pine and balsam root and Saskatoon bushes, but along the narrow shoreline, cottonwoods grow, providing shade and shielding the beach from the view of the roads and hills, so it seems a separate, discrete world. Overhead, the sky is cloudless, a deep, even, saturated blue. The lake is a darker blue, and the hills on the far side of the lake a different shade yet, though of course they're not really blue, but dark green from the pines and firs and gold from the sunburned grass. And the lake is not really blue, only in the distance where it reflects sky. At the shore, it is clear like glass, and a little deeper, a light, shimmery green. Beyond that, deeper green, though still translucent. Sidonie, 14, wades into her knees, her thighs, then stands transfixed, watching a play of light and color in the water, which has become a layered, moving thing. Minnows materialize, nibble at her shins. Submerged, swimming with her eyes open, she sees the water is clear, not like glass, but like something else she has never seen but can imagine, something viscous but so bright that light is refracted stronger, intensified by it. For as long as she can hold her breath, she is set free in this medium, free of gravity, of the gaze of others. She arches her back and swims seahorse-like along the smooth bottom stones. They are black, white, ochre, rose, green, gray. They form a mosaic of a kind, random, abstract, but with a sense of pattern, a pattern she could discern if only she could stay under long enough. She launches herself upward for a few lungs full of air and is under again. Now she noses along the bottom, waving her legs from side to side for thrust, fluttering her fingers for equilibrium. The small ripples she leaves on the surface are reflected on the lake bottom, a net of light. She swims in the net, banking and rolling to catch her own shadow, which, infant-sized, darts along with her. She pulls herself up to the ladder of the wharf, walks wet-footed across the silvery, slivery wood planks to the edge, toes pointed to the open lake, heels on the wooden edge. She finds the position that will catapult her perfectly in an arc extending from the earth's center, then springs, the forces of gravity, of momentum, of centrifuge, the pull of stars, the leap of molecules all gather in her legs, her arched spine. The crown of her head lifts her up, over. She feels her spine and legs now follow a lariat, a flung chain. Her fingertips part the surface of the water, then her head and torso and toes. She feels each cell of her skin join with the water. It takes no time at all. Then she arcs up through the water, her limbs smoothly building on the propulsion of the dive. The lake parts for her, supports her like lifts her, but she is a fish girl, all sinuous, eely tail and trunk, strong, supple arms. She is fish girl, cool, mailed in chitin, slippery, gilled. She is sleek, she hides in shadows. She watches from her cool, refracting element. She moves without hindrance or hesitation. She pulls herself through the water, waving her tail legs behind her. So, fun at the lake.
Bring back memories, Char.
Yeah. So the next pieces I'll read are from the next three novels, which are trilogy, or I guess that's the word. They follow the same set of characters over time, so I guess we'd call that a trilogy. So these are West Coast novels, and they're about a family of siblings who start off in a small rural community, and in a kind of what's the word I want? I've just lost the word. An off-grid family that's a counterculture off-grid family in the 70s. And at the beginning of the first novel, an event happens. The children's mother is hospitalized after the birth of the fifth child, who wouldn't be, and the father has a heart attack, and the children subsequently are split up into different homes and grow up separately, and then reconvene or find each other again in the 90s when they're all living in Vancouver. So the three novels follow the children from about 1979 up to, I think the last one ends in 2019, just before COVID. So for 40 years follows the novels. How many people here grew up in a small rural off-grid place, small town, out of the center of things? That's what I was trying to capture, that feeling of coming from a place like that. And then also the feeling of living in Vancouver and what Vancouver was like in the 90s. And then subsequently, as real estate got a little more expensive and the city got bigger and bigger. So I'll read the very beginning of the first of the three books, and then I'll read from near the end of the last one. And I don't have time to follow all the characters through all their arcs. So I hope to give you a taste of what this is like, or what they're like. So to start with, there are 5 children. There's Mandalay and Cleo, the 2 older girls, and then Shay and Cliff, 2 younger brothers, and then a baby, Bodhi. Later in the story, Bodhi is adopted and becomes Ben. So we follow these 5 or then 4 characters as one is lost through the 3 books. And I'm just going to start in 1979 when they are still children and their traumatic events happen. So this is through the point of view of the young sister Cleo, who's about 11 or 12. The same cops this time as the ones who came in June, which is a bad thing, she thinks. She imagines them saying to each other, "Not those people again." But a good thing too, because everything doesn't have to be explained all over again. They don't ask, "Where's your mom?" She's been trying to say what happened, but Shay and Cliff talk at the same time, interrupting so nothing can be heard. The older cop says, "Get those 2 out of here, okay?" So then it's just her, Cleo, talking. She's holding Bodhi, and they're sitting on some short logs there for the purpose in front of the house. It's early. The sun hasn't quite crested the cedars, and the clearing around the house is still. The younger cop says, "But don't you need a..." "Take them away," says the older cop. His uniform is of thick, shiny material, gray, green, blue, not organic looking. His hair is graying like Dada's, but cut short, bristles at the temple and nape. He doesn't want any of them in the house while the ambulance guys, the paramedics, are working. She looks over to the squad car parked in their front yard. Shay and Cliff wrestling over the steering wheel, the younger cop's face. The older cop says, "Now, walk me through it all again." Cleo is afraid she'll contradict herself. She knows from the detective shows on TV that you can get into trouble for that. "I went to get Dada up," she says. "It was 8:45 and we needed to leave for school, so I went to wake him up to drive us." She keeps the image in her head now firmly glued to the clock beside her bed. Her clock that she had asked for and got for her birthday, the only clock in the house. And the boys sitting in a row on the bed, all dressed properly and clean, forbidden to move. That was the deal. Some mornings, Dada just needed to sleep in. He had a bad night. His back was killing him. "Give me 10 minutes warning," he said. So Mandalay would leave, running down the driveway to catch the high school bus for Port Paul River, and Cleo would get herself and everyone else ready, the boys into their jeans and t-shirts and jackets, and herself into whatever was in the basket, which might not be much if she hadn't done some laundry the day before and if Mandalay had beaten her to it. Mandalay doesn't remember to do laundry, and she wears what Cleo was planning to wear. Dada says, "Don't do all of the laundry. Let your sister learn the natural consequences of her actions." But he also says, "No personal property in the form of clothing." So there isn't much choice. Get herself dressed in whatever is semi-clean and mended, and then wake up Dada, and he would put on his pants and find his glasses and the truck keys. And if Dada was going to be working that day, Bodhi needed to be dropped off at Myrna's. So all of them climbing into the cab and Bodhi on Cleo's lap. But this morning, a great tiredness washes over her like sand-warmed waves at the beach, the tide coming in. That feeling, the whole ocean seeping into the bay, the water warmed and lulling. "So you tried to wake your dad up," the cop prompts. "What happened then?" Bodhi wriggles away from Cleo and goes after the cop. She should get those diapers washed out. Dada does his own and the boys' laundry, even Bodhi's diapers usually. He takes the wet clothes out to the line, his height meaning he doesn't have to stand on a stump like Cleo does, and pins them up. He says hanging out clothes is an art, Cleo. You want to put your attention into it. You want to find the zen of it. "Come on, Cleo," says the cop, plucking Bodhi up at arm's length, sort of like he's lifting up a muddy dog. "I know this isn't fun, but just run through it for me one more time and we'll be done." "I'm 12, Cleo says, meaning Don't talk to me like a baby. She sees the cop's face sag, lose some of its resolution. She says again what she said before on the phone to the cops and the ambulance guys when they first arrived, coming in the door, and then the younger guy cop bolting out quite quickly to throw up under the red osier dogwood. The smell, he said, coming back in, but she guessed it wasn't just that. The open bucket of Bodie's cloth diapers, which were getting a bit rank, but also the bucket of chicken guts and heads, which they hadn't put outside because of the bears, and which she should probably bury pretty quickly. He didn't wake up. I tried shaking his shoulder and talking real loud. Then Shay did, but he didn't open his eyes. So I felt his chest, but nothing. And then finally she is done, and now her mind is quiet, and she can ask some questions, which are, is someone going to tell Mandalay? And what will happen next? Not the questions burrowing away inside her, burrowing away at some internal organ like her liver. Did we kill Dada? Did we? Right. So there's our beginning. Chaos and confusion. So that's the first of the three. What is going to happen next? Which is a very weird title for a book. It was my joke working title until we were doing final edits, and my editor at the publisher said you need a title, and then I thought, well, actually, that kind of works. Right? So, what is going to happen next? The second novel, I'm not going to read through tonight. Or read from tonight. It's called A Brief View from the Coastal Suite. So, most of what is going to happen next is set in 1999 in Vancouver, except for that first little bit I read. A Brief View from the Coastal Suite picks up with the characters in 2008, and just around the financial crash. So they have a brief view from the coastal suite, and then everything goes to hell, right? This one's called Where We Live. Again, a struggle finding a book title, and then speaking with my editor about it, we decided that all three of the books were actually about people trying to find home and trying to find out what home was. So this picks up with the characters, the same characters again in, I think it starts in 2015 or 16, now I can't remember. And then in 2016, and ends in 2019 with the characters having lots of plans, travel plans, educational plans, all sorts of fun plans. And of course, as readers, we know what's going to happen next, and they aren't going to be able to fulfill some of those plans as 2020 dawns. Anyway, so I'm just going to read a bit from the end of this. So at this point, we've followed 4 of the characters for 4 decades, or 3 decades as adults. And I end this one with a view of the youngest of the, or not the youngest of the brothers, the second youngest of the brothers, Cliff. And Cliff, throughout the 3 novels, has quite a difficult time. He has a few accidents, partly to do with his upbringing, I think, and his life adventures. He starts off maybe a little bit out of step with the world and has to find himself. At the end of A Brief View from the Coastal Suite, sorry, thump. Cliff, who works for a landscaper, is on a hillside lot and gets caught in a mudslide. And we don't know until the 3rd book whether he makes it or not. So what's that called if you leave a book, not knowing what's happening to a character? It's a cliffhanger, right? So bad joke. Didn't realize at the time. But in fact, people were writing me and saying, please tell me that Cliff didn't die. Cliff is my favorite character. So Cliff got to live. So I ended the 3rd book with Cliff. At this point, Cliff he's had some bad physical accidents, and he is now, how old is he? He must be 45 or something in this book. And he is leaving Vancouver and traveling back to the imaginary West Coast small town of Butterfly Lake, where all the characters come from. And as he's getting ready to leave, he finds himself handed custody of his youngest brother, Bodie, Ben's son, Oscar. So here's Cliff traveling back from Vancouver to Butterfly Lake with a small child he doesn't know very well in his possession and feeling quite awkward about it. Cliff's body has stiffened even in the first couple of hours of driving, and the first few steps onto the beach are excruciating. The hinges of his knees are locked, his feet solid, unresponsive blocks, his hip joints wobbly in their sockets, his spine compressed into something the size and rigidity of an umbrella shaft. He stops out of necessity, flexes his knees, bends over at the waist to let his torso hang down. His arms dangle, his hands tingle with returning circulation. His fingers reach for the earth. He imagines someone holding him up by the heels as if he were a newborn, his bones extending, his joints claiming space, his lungs expanding. He can just hang out here for a moment. There's light crunching on the gravel. The boy draws near, shadow, feet. He bends over, mimicking Cliff's position. "What are you doing?" Oscar asks. "Stretching out my joints," Cliff says. The boy laughs and bends over and effortlessly puts the palms of his hands flat on the stones. Cliff feels within his stiff frame the ghost of his own child body, the lightness, the fluidity. He straightens up, palms to thighs, engaging his core muscles. He has to use his arms as counterweights to swing himself up. His vertebrae find their places, stack themselves more comfortably than before. There. "Oh, hey, Oscar," he says to the boy. "Let's explore, eh?" The boy is off like a pup, running back and forth, running circles around Cliff, stopping to peer and prod and turn objects over in his hands. They progress at the same pace, Cliff lumbering along, feeling his way, the flat oval stones sliding over each other. Each footstep has to be initiated with caution. He's a giant, a mountain troll. Crunch, crunch. The boy runs circles, stops to crouch and peer, doubles back. Cliff lumbers after him. Cliff's knees protest at the uneven ground. They send up signals of self-doubt. They do not know if they can hold him up. His body is like a log balanced on two stumps. If I were a car, Cliff thinks, I'd tow myself to the wreckers. They walk back along the beach a little, and Cliff sits, lowering himself onto the gravel, where there's a driftwood log to lean against. He won't be able to sit for long. The stones are hard, and there's damp below the surface. The log isn't high enough to support his back, and the beach is sloped, his legs not able to prop him. Oscar crouches a little distance away, squatting, his stick arms and legs folded like paper clips, his center of gravity balanced over his feet in his tan sandals. The boy says nothing. He pokes at the rocks, withdraws his fingers when he sees the wet undersides, begins turning them over. "Do you want to wade?" Cliff asks. "We could look for starfish." The boy shakes his head. "Okay," Cliff says. "That's okay." After a minute, the boy gets up. Cliff watches him out of the corner of his eye. He can't tell. Is Oscar young enough to fall into the water and drown? He looks old enough to have common sense not to, but Cliff can't be sure, can he? The boy runs in a little circle, looks back at Cliff. He picks up a stick. He drags the stick along the water's edge. He squats there, jumping back a little as the waves brush his toes. He looks back at Cliff. Cliff nods, doesn't make a move. He keeps the boy in his peripheral vision, lies down on the stones. His back protests and then relaxes. It would be great if he could invert himself, lie with his head pointing down towards the waves, his feet higher. But assuming he could get himself into that position in the first place, he has no idea how he would get up again. Besides, if he lies down, he'll fall asleep. But he must have dozed because suddenly the boy is bending over him in his face. "Do you have a bag?" he asks. "What for?" "My rock collection." He has filled the front of his t-shirt with polished oval stones. Cliff takes off his cap and the boy pours his collection in, a small avalanche, the satisfying clicking sound. He had not planned to bring the boy along. He'd have been about Oscar's age when he left Butterfly Lake, against his own will, against his mother's will. He's coming back now, not without trepidation. What will he do in this dark, lonely place? Who will he be? A deep, primeval fear of the woods, of the dark, of lonely places fills him. He'll fix up the house. He'll take care of Crystal and Oscar. He has given the city his best shot. He sees now that he can leave it and he will not become nothing. He will still know who he was. He will still be connected. It is inside of him, the gleaming, thriving, fast-moving city. It had tried to chew him up and spit him out, but he has it inside of him, the force and pride of it. There, in his house on his wooded lot, he will now grow into himself. He'll put down his roots. He'll become shelter. He'll grow old and craggy and wise. Wiser, anyway. He'll give himself to the small and vulnerable, so much as he is, in his cracked and feeble way, able. The boy stirs and makes a small noise in his sleep. Everything will be on Cliff's shoulders. He will make mistakes. He'll have nowhere to hide when he does. He'll have to keep his wits about him. He'll have to make better decisions. He'll have to take better care of himself. He will have to ask for help. He will fight to keep Oscar if the boy seems happy. He'll probably have to share him, but he thinks there's something that can be done. He'll talk to Ben's adoptive parents. He knows them from when he used to spend time with Ben when he and Ben were friends. He has visited them recently in their large house near the ocean. He thinks that they like him, that they trust him. He'll talk to Cleo. Maybe Oscar will want to go to the school in Butterfly Lake, the little school that Cliff went to. Cliff imagines the school being friendlier than when he was young, having softer edges. The parents all knowing each other, the teachers from the community as well. Maybe Oscar will want to have skates and Cliff will drive him to the rink in Powell River. Maybe Oscar will want to do hockey. But maybe he won't. Maybe he'll just want to mooch around, watching things on the ground, on the forest floor. He'll have to warn him about the bears and the cougars in the woods. The thing will be to let him be who he is, to pay attention to him, but not try to make him into something that, with that attention, to be a soft place for him to land, to let him discover on his own, to watch and listen. Cliff continues to drive up the road, his hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, the last stretch to home. Oscar stirs, opens his eyes. Where are we? He asks. We're home, Cliff says. And they are. They are now passing the sign that says, Welcome to Butterfly Lake. They are passing the little subdivision of newer houses. Around the next curve will be the driveway. This is home? Oscar asks. He has his face pressed against the side window. The trees at the roadside, alder mostly, flutter their leaves, a million green and silver flags. This is home, Cliff says. One of your homes, anyway. That's what it is.
Beautiful. Awesome. Awesome. The journey home. Beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much, Karen. That was delightful little tastes of each of those. And I got to say, I'm just in awe of your ability to keep track of people over decades and follow 5 characters. So I'm going to open the Q&A just and ask you. So did you have all 3 books kind of scoped out ahead of time, or did they totally evolve as you went along? So what was your process
That's a good
there?
question.
Yeah.
No, the first one started with that scene of Cleo and the cops and the chaos. And I thought it was a short story, and
Yeah.
I was working on it as a short story, and then at some point I realized that there was a lot more than would fit in a short story, that there was a lot more story there. So the next time I was able to get a sabbatical leave, I started writing, and it just grew into 100,000 words, and I thought, well, that was fun. There's a book.
Yeah.
So that was supposed to be a one-off, but then I don't know, even before it came out in print, the characters were talking to me again. And so that's how my books start, I think, is a character will start talking to me in my head, and I start writing things down, and before you know it, I get very curious about, what's going to happen next. What could happen to this character? So then the second book came along, and then I thought, okay, well, that's good, but 3 is really a nicer number than 2. So I wonder if there's another one. And in fact, they did start talking to me again. So there was a third book, and that was fun to write because the characters were catching up with me in age, I think, and their parents were growing old, and they had children who then were growing up, and so that was fun. I like those kinds of books that carry on for years and years. And saga, I guess, is maybe one of the words, or family saga.
Yeah.
I enjoy reading those, and so it was fun to write that. It was not my intention at first. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, awesome. And I love like the way you describe it, the characters talking to you. And so it's like you have to just trust them, right? And give them their way and let them go and see what happens and follow them. And that's so exciting, I'm sure, along the way.
That's right. I mean, I think it sounds almost like one's describing like something like a visionary state, but they do talk, right? They do talk inside your head.
Yeah.
And usually that lasts for long enough that you get something down on paper, and then you have to say, oh, they've stopped talking to me, but if I want to make something of this, I have to figure out, what's coming then.
Yeah.
So then the work starts.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Open it up here. Anybody have any questions here in the house or out there in Zoom land? Just unmute in Zoom land and pipe up and.
Oh, Derek. It's somebody in the audience. Okay.
Robbie, I'll just get you to come to the mic and ask that again. Sorry, so people out in Zoom land there can be in the loop.
Do you find that when you're writing that you start off with something and you follow a thread, and like Stephen King says, he can't wait to see how it ends when he starts a book. Something captures his mind. He'll wake up in the middle of the night with this fixation in his head, and he has to follow it through to the ending. So I think all artists have that spontaneity of spirit that comes forward in their works. And it's the miracle of creation for me. It's just brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you, Robbie. Thank you for comparing me to Stephen King. I wish I had his sources of inspiration, but I think that's what happens. It's the feeling that something is coming from somewhere else, right? And I suppose really it's a culmination of a lot of reading of other authors and thinking about other work. And I taught literature as well as creative writing, so have 2 literature degrees. So I did a lot of reading and learning to observe, and then that sort of makes this primordial soup. This is my great psychological theory of creativity. Makes this primordial soup in your subconscious, your unconscious, which then provides that kind of inspiration that feels like it's external. Do you find that, Robbie, as you write? Yeah. And that's the lovely part of writing, when that's flowing, but not always as much fun when it's not happening and you still have to make yourself sit down at your desk every day and think, right? What could this character do today? It's not telling me what it's going to do, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think the Greeks they called it the daemon, right? Would come and take over, and so when your thing was finished, it was like you didn't take the credit. It was my daemon who did it. Well, I just got out of the way, and I was a channel or whatever that it came through. But
yes.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Anyone out there in Zoom land with a question? I think Kathy is leaning forward to unmute.
Oh, yeah, I thought so. By the way, Derek, they say the Greeks had a saying that a man's daemon is his character. Might go for, can you hear me? No, I can't.
Say that again, Catherine. I couldn't.
Okay, they said a man's daemon is his character.
Oh.
Okay.
But I suppose it applies to women. Anyway, thank you very much. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Hear your words. I hate to ask something so mundane because it seems bad after hearing such exciting story, but how did you get from that story to being able to hold up a book?
Oh, so a process question. I love this question. Yeah. So I think what happens is, I do listen to the Damon and rate when things come into my head, and make sure that I fill my notebooks and so on. But then sometimes the curiosity will carry me on long enough that I do fill enough notebooks to create a book, which takes a long time actually. And for, I think a novel is about 100,000 words, which is a lot of writing. And there's so much rewriting that you're probably writing 6 pages for every page that ends up in a book. So really, the muse and the inspiration, that's the fun part, but it's a lot of sitting at your notebook or your desk or your computer for days after days, weeks after weeks, for a couple of years per novel, I guess. So yeah, it's just really what it comes down to. I mean, that's kind of the boring side of it. It just comes down to sitting down and putting in, thousands of hours of that work, right?
Yeah.
And then thinking about it, doing a lot of thinking about it. How does this fit? Does this work? How many levels does this work on, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. But that's a really good question.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was I could feel the multi levels going on at that coming home scene, right? It's like he's got his inner child with him, even it's his relative, but it's really coming home, the big coming home. So yeah, it is wonderful. And you use a lot of mythology as well, apparently in your work, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, we have this as 21st century Western people, we have access to so many mythologies, and we can use all these layers of things in our writing to create all these effects at different levels of consciousness, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Hmm.
And then you have these readers, of course, who read your book and say, "Oh, gee, I could have done that."
Anyone could, really.
Yeah, right.
Actually.
Yeah.
I don't think I think what people that get a novel published have that's different from everyone else is kind of like a stupid persistence. So, not knowing when to quit.
That's right. Yeah, we're all bitten by the same bug,
Right.
All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Karen. That was really delightful.
Thank you so much.
Reminder of books here if you need them. Anybody want to pick one up? Can even get them signed. All right. So where are we going? Oh, we're staying in house, and Vicki Drybrough is going to share some of her work with us now. She's got you next on the list.
Wow, that's a tough act to follow. To be honest with you, I cannot remember from one month to the next what I read previously. So, because I prepare maybe 2 or 3 things to read and then I choose one. And I don't know if I, actually read this before or if I just prepared it and didn't bother. So anyway, here we go. It's part of chapter 15 from, my novel, 1963. After school, I stay in town and head for Fisherman's Wharf. In spite of the breeze off the sea, the wharf smells of creosote and fuel. I pick my way down the ramp, being careful not to catch my pointed-toed shoes on the wooden strips. As soon as I step onto the float, I'm in an alley of masts, many boats tied 2 or 3 deep. Down here, the smell of purple gas mixes with the frying bologna. An old man in dark wool pants and faded blue shirt over his Stanfields is sitting in the stern of his boat. He looks up as I walk past. I try to smile, but feel awkward and embarrassed. He stares at me as if I have done something inappropriate, so I turn away and keep walking. Another man glances up as I pass the stern of his boat. but I look ahead where loud voices and harsh laughter spill from the deck of a seiner, where a group of men have gathered. As I approach, the smell of booze overwhelms the smell of the sea. One of them turns to look at me and howls like a wolf. "Hey, sweetheart, what's your hurry?" "Come over here," calls another. "I got something for you." They all laugh. I look down and walk faster. My mother didn't tell me how to behave on a dock surrounded by men. "Stay away from there. You're just asking for trouble," would be her advice. But here I am, not asking for trouble, just looking for Sam. A young man steps out of a small aluminum boat. His pants are filthy, and so are his shirt and jacket. He is carrying a fish and a fishing rod in one hand, a red metal gas tank in the other. He nods and says hello. "Do you know where the Lulu Bell is?" I ask. He points. "Down at the end, turn left." I thank him and hurry on past more boats, the smell of creosote in the sun burning my nose and throat. When I turn the corner, I see Sam stepping off the Lulu Bell with his rucksack over his shoulder. I wave and smile, but he stands there staring back as if he doesn't know me. When I get close, he finally speaks. "Well, look at you, all fancy with your hair up." I ignore the dig. "Guess what?" He starts walking. I have no idea. "Lester came by to say you can have the job if you're still interested." "When was this?" 2 days ago. I'm sure that Sam will come home now. We walk along in silence until we reach the parking lot. "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. Maybe. I'll go see him tomorrow." "Will you stop and see us? Mom and I miss you. I think Dad does too." Sam snorts. "Cold day in hell." "Come and see us, okay?" I watch as he turns away, heading to Auntie Min's place where he stays when he isn't fishing. I turn and start for the ferry wharf, which is now located on the other side of the freight and rail yards, where ships are loading lumber for Japan and the US. I am angry with Sam for not wanting to visit us and for having to search for him among the boats. I hate walking across the acres of wide open yard that smells of grease and oil and that metal smell that large machines have. After dodging several freight trucks, I still have to cross the rail yard with its many tracks that smell of creosote and rusted metal. One of the locomotives is running, and there is the stink of diesel, the throbbing of the engine as it pushes the rail cars around. I always feel dirty by the time I catch the ferry. When we get to the island, I catch a ride with our neighbor, Mr. McKee, who lives across the road from us. He lets me out at the gate, and I take the hairpins out of my hair and shake it loose, combing it with my fingers until it lies flat. I'm not allowed to wear my hair up because it makes me look older. My father already doesn't like the adult shoes I wear with my new skirt. No point upsetting him any further. When I come through the door, my father is sitting at the table writing. My mother looks at me to see if I have been able to talk to Sam. I nod and carry on to my room. After a minute, she follows me in. "Did you see him?" "Yeah." I take off my coat and throw it on the chair. He didn't seem very excited about the news. "Did he say he would come?" I lie, so I don't have to see the disappointment on her face. "He said he might drop by after he goes to see Lester." She smiles. "It will be lovely to see him again. I hope he can stay for supper." "Yeah." I smile back, glad I didn't tell her about a cold day in hell.
Beautiful. Thank you, Vicki. And no, I don't think you've ever read that one before. That was fresh to all of us. And mind you, I don't know, my wife and I get halfway through a movie these days and say, God, this is starting to look familiar. But I would have remembered your story for sure. All right. Where are we going now? Okay. Kathleen Vance over in Gibsons Landing is up next. Hello, Kathleen again.
Okay, well, gee, that was great. I mean, I would have remembered a cold day in hell, I'll tell you that. That was great. Okay, I'm gonna just end this murder. I can't take it any longer myself. Okay, Little Bloom knew their moment had come. Mr. McSweeney's motto for his shop was, "We speak the language of flowers," and he did. I tried to tell you that at the beginning, but you wouldn't let me. Well, we're sorry, but everyone is all ears now, Lil, Henry reassured them with his apology. The flower order for Miss Gallows was common laurel and larkspur, which means perfidy and fickleness. For Mrs. Bannister was lavender for distrust and foxglove for insincerity. For Mr. Torres was nightshade for falsehood and scarlet for avarice. Finally, the order for Mrs. Moore was yellow carnation for disdain and bilberry for treachery. I looked them all up in the book from my grandmother, Lil said proudly. It was thanks to Lil that we realized what was behind the flower orders, Heather said, giving all her attention to the 4 suspects. I'm afraid Mr. Liam McSweeney felt betrayed by all of you and wanted you to know it. And by pretending that you had sent each other the bouquets, he wanted to play you off against each other. Heather would have commiserated with the 4 had she believed she was talking to innocent victims. But having listened to everything Lil had to say in their detective agency conference, she knew how misplaced those sympathies would have been. What about Mr. Jack McSweeney? How did he feel about the sale? Harry wanted to know. Laura may have been a reformed lawyer, but she was still on top of her game. Jack McSweeney inherited the business and the development interests, but he has little interest in either. He's backing the sale of the land to the trust, and he's already put the floristry shop on the market. So you see, some good has come from Mr. Liam McSweeney's death. The land trust makes no profit from the land and will hold it in perpetuity for a park and for co-op housing for people who really need it, Dallow summed up as she prepared to leave the meeting. Harry propped his feet up on his desk, leaned back and folded his arms and looked at them as he pronounced, "How convenient of Liam McSweeney to fall off a cliff when he did. I checked. None of you were anywhere near Mighty Oak Ridge that day. So how did they do it?" I kept wondering. Heather and I think Lil knows. Lil tried to tell us at the very beginning of this case. Don't hold a grudge just because no one listens to kids. Please tell us now, Lil. As I tried to tell you before, we go to Mighty Oak Ridge every June for our end of school year trip. The teachers are always worried one of us will fall and break our necks. The teachers always tell us the story of the young man who leaned over to pick a bunch of beautiful flowers for his sweetheart and toppled to his death. I think that's what happened to Mr. McSweeney. So what's that got to do with us? Mr. Torres asked with some truculence. Everything, said Heather. If each of you nearly a year before had walked along that same path, nonchalantly tossing seeds over the edge of the fence at just that spot, then you patiently waited for your seeds to take root. You knew Liam McSweeney walked that path almost every day. You also knew that McSweeney's floristry shop was not like those newer florists that feature locally grown flowers and live plants, similar to the new aquariums with their catch and release programs. McSweeney's shop featured only cut flowers from far away across the globe. You knew that when Liam McSweeney saw those beautiful flowers at Lookout Point at Mighty Oak Ridge, he would have to pick them, to own them. They couldn't just leave them to waft in the wind, soak up the sunshine, and finally wither and die. You counted on his own peculiar kind of greed, and you were right. He leaned over to pick the flowers and he toppled. But you all sowed the seeds that toppled him. You're all topplers. We only wanted to frustrate him. Every day in his walk, he would see another prized flower just beyond his reach. How were we to know he would stoop to conquer and plunge to his death? Dallow said in their defense. This is a nice story, but it's just a story. The answer to what happened to McSweeney is like those seeds you're imagining, just blowing in the wind, Victor observed, thinking of his favorite singer. The point is that what will you tell your client, and do you intend to go to the police? Laura asked, all business. We'll tell the client that his brother died doing what he loved, picking flowers. As for whether to go to the police, we've decided to leave that to little Bloom, Harry answered. No point in going to the police. No charges would ever be laid. No jury of peers would ever convict. As for sowing the seeds to destroy life, you're all guilty, Lil pronounced. But there's always hope. I see you're trying to change. Heather and Harry were relieved. They had agreed to leave the last word to Lil and their generation. The end.
Awesome, Kathleen. You brought it to a beautiful conclusion. Every month we've been hanging on that. I'm going to sleep better now, I'm sure. We've been patient to get to the end, just like they were patient to murder him, I guess. Anyway, that was great. Thank you. Are you going to start a new saga next month then?
Well, I hate to tell you, but I had to go to a sleep clinic. And I wanted to ask the technician there how you could murder somebody in a sleep clinic. But I thought I'd better not. But now I'm trying to think of it.
You might get an unexpected knock on the door from somebody.
I know.
All right. Thanks so much. Okay. What do we got next now? Oh, Nav isn't here, our spotlight. He's up in Courtney, unfortunately. So we're going to have to skip Nav. We'll save him for next month, I guess. And so we're going to go to Atma, back to Gibson's Landing.
Hi.
Yes. Hey, Atma, how are you?
Good. I'm going to read prose this time instead of poetry. And it's the opening of one of the stories that's in a book I'm working on. And it's a book of connected stories. They're all set in Belgium between 1960 and the present. And they also follow a bunch of characters through time. Beautiful. So this one is called Darkness Hangs Between the Folds. Even though it's a hot day at the Mayfair, your sister is wearing a tight white sweater, which shows a bit of her belly when she lifts her arms and fluffs her hair. Wait here, Vivian hisses, and walks over to a boy who lives on the corner of your street. He's standing next to an arrangement of prune pies and pink frosted cakes, a volunteer badge pinned to the breast pocket of his green polo shirt. Vivian cocks her head and smiles, showing off her teeth, which have just been freed from retainers. While she talks, she touches his arms. After a few minutes of this, you leave and wander around on your own. You never have luck, but today you win at the fair's lottery. First prize, a pair of doves. They huddle together on the wooden bottom of their cage, heads pulled in. As you weave your way through clusters of people, a small boy runs alongside you. These were his doves. Gasping for breath, he says, "Promise you look after them." You nod and clutch the cage close to your body, the steel bars cold against your chest. When you're an old woman, you will suddenly remember this boy and his fearful brown eyes. The memory will haunt you. Your parents and grandpa are having beers in the bar tent, a plate of broiled drumsticks and a breadbasket in the middle of the table. It's stuffy and dim inside the canvas enclosure. Where's Vivienne? Your father asks. She's at a cake contest. You put a cage on the table. Look what I've won. He picks up a penny and runs it along the rods, making them ring. The doves fly up in a flurry of white wings beating against the hardness of the cage. Stop it, you're frightening them. Your father leans back. They're just some pigeons. No, they're not, they're pet doves. Oh, not so fast. He crosses his arms. Pigeons are messy. They'll shit and shed feathers all over the place. You'd better go and exchange them for another prize. He raises his index finger, motioning the waiter over, and orders another round of beer, and without asking, a cola for you. The doves settle down, chest heaving under the white smooth feathers, black eyes alert. You crumble some bread and push it between the bars. Why can't I keep them? I want them with my own pocket money. Your mother's mouth is moving as if it's full of silent words. She does that when she's nervous. You know that she wants you to back down, to not stand up to your father. When you all leave the fair, she might take you aside and scold you. They're not a pair of parakeets that you can keep in a cage, your father says. They need a coop. Just then Vivienne is behind you, leaning over your shoulder. Doves, how cute! She reaches for the small door. I want to hold one. Enough of these birds. Your father moves the cage onto the floor and shoves the plates of drumsticks towards you and Vivienne. We kept you some supper. Fat has coagulated in thick, cold drops. Vivienne strips a stiff skin of a chicken leg and bites into the white flesh. Meanwhile, your grandpa takes 2 cigars from his breast pocket and hands one to your father, who sniffs it. Nice. He lights it, inhaling deeply. When Vivienne was small, she sometimes sat on his lap and poked at the smoke rings he blew. I can build a coop, your grandpa says, and Annie can stop by after school to feed the doves and keep it clean. No need for that. Your father pats the top of the cage. We've got space in our own yard, and Annie is old enough to look after them by herself. The doves are pecking at their feathers. Your first pets. Already you love them. At first, the doves crowd in the corner when you clean the coop your grandpa made from wood and chicken wire. After a few weeks, they waddle closer and softly peck your hand as you fill their grain cup. You know it's time to let them go, but you wait a few more days before you open the coop door and step back. The first dove peeks out, walks onto the perch and takes flight. The other follows. Higher and higher, 2 small dots in the blue sky. You stay in the backyard, a wild wind tugging at your dress. You hug yourself while you wait for the 2 dots to reappear and swell into a world of white.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Lovely, Atma. That was great. There's I don't know, the prose you write has that, I don't know, nuance of your poetry at the same time.
Thank you.
Mesmerizing and that ending was lovely. Absolutely.
Well, it's not the ending. This is like the midway the story. Thank you.
Okay. I will look forward to where it goes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
All right, we're back in house live now in Joe Lunchbucket. Where's he gone? Bob, where are you? There you are, hiding behind Robbie. Come on up. You're going to have a hard time topping that poem you did last month, Bob. I don't know if... All right, we'll just slide that up. Perfect. There we go. No Kyle tonight. Char's got to do
How's
everything.
Can you hear me breathing?
Yes, that's good. We hear you breathing. Okay.
How do attractive, smart people end up single and not rich? Did high morals bar them from scratching evolution's itch? Do nice guys finish last, or are some unlucky in love and war? If at first they didn't succeed, did other options they explore? Some of us fail to attain a qualifying degree, but are blessed with good looks and modesty? Was it inhibition, low IQ, or no education? Did they lack sex drive to seed the next generation? We all start from a crawl, but the future's not ours to see. Is being born gifted or rich any guarantee for longevity in marriage? Who will the least likely be? Did all the successful kids win the genetic draw, and did some overcome and drew the short straw? Should we tarry to marry or savor life's rosebuds while we may? Brief can be our stay. Shall we savor the fragrance of our bouquet? Was the road not taken in life the reason we're alone? Were dreams unfulfilled? Was height of our ambition drone? Does Creator send only what misfortune each of us can handle? Is someone for everyone? Do we navigate the dark without a candle? We are our brother's keepers, and not all pass life's stress test. Must we aid the depressed that scored second best in life contest? Did they make wrong choices, suffer addiction, sought trophy mate, squandered opportunity, failed to date, or committed too late? Is saving for a rainy day and dying virgin with big estate fool, cruel fate?
Thank you, Bob. All right. I think that was autobiographical, that part. Good looking and modest. Thank you, Bob. All right. And we're still going to stay in house here with the infinitely flexible Victoria Roscoe-Roumanis, who's going to share some poetry now. Probably not as flexible as that character in Karen's novel, though. It was the grandson that was doing, or the nephew that was doing the bending there. Yeah.
I think so.
That looks good.
That's good.
And the camera's good too, Char. No rush.
Well,
Yeah.
another wonderful evening. And I have a solution for Bill. 2 years ago, I planted a thornless blackberry, which has taken off halfway down one side of my garden. And it's full of flowers. And you know what? There's no thorns. It's absolutely wonderful.
Uh-huh. All right.
So we highly recommend it. So I've written today about free-range children. The children ate breakfast, left the house to join friends. No rules, no orders as to when to come home. Often the path led to the banks of the canal. None of them could swim. Sometimes with jam jar in hand, leaning over the water to catch a jack shark or two. An unlucky little fish to spend the remainder of its life in a 12-ounce jar. The greatest fun was being pushed out by a friend over the water on a wooden arm, clinging to the dangling rope. This was a dry dock area on the canal, which could be drained when a barge required maintenance. The rope was used to lift heavy objects in and out of the barges. Sometimes the push would not be hard enough, and the child was left dangling over the water enough to cover their head. Rescue was up to the hanging one, furiously kicking and jerking themselves back to the bank. Surprisingly, none of them drowned. With a 5-mile walk home to her village, Dutton, after an elementary school day, stopping and playing in the woods, the phone box, checking the time on the sundial, exploring the disused blacksmith shop where her grandfather had been the farrier, visiting the homes of schoolmates who lived closer to the school. A favorite stop occasionally was visiting the greenhouses of the commercial gardens owned by the writer's Uncle Fred's family-in-law. It was extra exciting because the gardens were surrounded by a huge brick wall, which made it seem like a secret garden. The children were always given a plant to take home to their mother. About halfway home in the little wooded area at Joe's farm, they swung on the thick rope which hung, with a huge knot on the end, or gathered conkers in the autumn from a chestnut tree in preparation for the challenge of the strongest conker. In winter, tunnels would be made in the snowdrifts at the top of Aston Hill. Wet and cold, they would continue to travel home, red-faced and happy. From here, just two of them were left for the remainder of the journey. Colin was her companion, who lived at the beginning of the village, where her home was on Anvil Farm. Now, on her own, the writer recalls stopping for tea and biscuits with Mrs. Clark and her daughter Lucy, who lived in a cottage at the beginning of her village. Mrs. Clark was a motherly senior who always made the young visitor welcome. I always remember her long skirts and her woolen shawl. Her daughter always told the same story about a person who had a lisp. My mother says I lisp, but I don't perceive it. You see if I don't. Come on, Puss, have a drink of milk in the saucer. Lucy always found this hilarious and laughed loudly for a long time. Their house was on the banks of the railway, with the solid wooden fence at the back of the garden overlooking the embankment of the railway. The fence was quite high, which meant she had to stand on her tiptoes to look over to see the passing train. It always reminded her of the TV series, The Railway Children. Finally, she arrived home at the farm. Her father would always be walking towards his vehicle saying, "Oh, I was just coming to get you." She realized when she was older that this was just a white lie, and he had no intention of going to get her. Obviously, it could take hours to get home, with never a question of, "Where have you been?" The children were free range in those days. "We'll see you when you get here," was the attitude. When the girl graduated to high school, the bus stopped at the end of Northwich Road, requiring a mile walk home to the village. She can remember walking that lonely road with only one house halfway. Sometimes in the winter, when she had extra activities, she had to walk home in the dark. She was terrified and always seemed to conjure up in her imagination dark figures lurking in the gateways and the hedges. Nobody ever came to pick her up. Gladly, none of these figures turned out to be ghosts or criminals.
We better call it there, Victoria. That's
Pardon?
you're over time there. Well,
Oh, I've only got 4 lines. Can I read them?
go for it. You bet. Yeah.
Sometimes she thought nobody cared if she came home or not. Hopefully, this was not the case. It was just a way of life many years ago. Free to roam indeed. We were lucky compared to today's children, who are practically chained to their parents, and for good reason. Yes, things were different then, and she is thankful for that. She was a free-range child.
Oh, the good old days, eh? We had it so free. It's so true. Yeah. And we got into our share of trouble, but we survived, right? Okay. All right, we're going back out to Zoomland now, and David Kipling's gonna read to us from Gibson's Landing. Push Kathleen off the couch there and gently.
Gently.
Okay. Evening, David.
Hi there. Good. This is a slice. This is 1942. Okay. So there we go. It's set in England. An evening mist hung above the canal as their coal barge left behind the city and its air raids. Across the flatlands, Rosie had seen workers harvesting sugar beet. A panorama of bent backs and shuffling boots in the damp air made Rosie feel the weight of time. Plodding horses hauled wooden carts along country lanes, and tractors grumbled back and forth, scooping out rows of potatoes. Calls and whistles between work gangs of men and women, boys and girls, came through the mist. Two familiar barges were moored end to end at the bank ahead. Rosie recognised Joan's Mayfly and that of Dan Hillier. "Tied up already?" Rosie called. Joan and Dan were talking together on the bank and waved to her. "Yes, this'll do for today. There's a bit of a fire and a supper going on in the field. We're going to see." "No gypsies here, move along," a voice bellowed through the hawthorn hedges. A sullen face under a tweed hat frowned at them. "Excuse me," retorted Rosie, proudly tapping the metal badge on the bib of her overalls. "We're bargees, not gypsies. We work for the Transport Ministry, and this bank here is part of the Grand Union Canal, so—" Jacko leapt ashore, hammered in two mooring spikes, and tied the barge firmly to them. He pushed through a gap in the hedge, ignoring the farmer. A babble of voices followed him as he clambered back. "Mum, the pickers are having a fire and a meal. We could cook our dinner there with them." Rosie followed Dan and Joan cautiously through the hedge. Long heaps of sugar beet and standing sacks of potatoes lay like ammunition dumps on the muddy earth. Women in overcoats and army trousers had dragged a canvas tarpaulin over a farm trailer as a windbreak, and their children were already building shelters from branches and empty sacks. A bonfire was being fed old fence posts on which creosote flared and spat. "Come on over, love," called a woman, waving a hand, calloused by labour. "You don't happen to have a pinch of tea with you, perhaps?" Rosie paused. "Just a bit. Us canal workers are rationed the same as anyone, but I do have some sugar." Jacko watched some boys showing off tricks with the sugar beet knives. Wooden-handled, foot-long blades with a hook. "Look, Mum, like those things they chop through the jungle with in the films." A man gestured for Jacko's attention, hooked a beet up from the earth, swung the blade to sever its leafy top, and let the root fly towards the startled Jacko. The harvesters laughed. The man looked seriously at Jacko. "Clever chap, aren't I? Bent over all day, covered in mud, all weathers, sleep in a trailer, and 2 weeks later I'll be broke again. Clever chap, me." Two women worked to empty baskets of potatoes into burlap sacks, shaking the sacks to settle the weight. "Full," one called, and pleated the sack's open top into a tight dovetail, while the companion knotted coarse twine round it, wincing. "Need my beauty lotion tonight." Rosie looked towards a gaunt figure standing stiffly beside the big tractor wheel. Under a colourless headscarf tied hard against her jaw, she chewed her lips and frowned at the fire. "Maggie's all right," a woman touched Rosie's arm, "just not right in the head. Maggie can drive that tractor straight as an arrow. She's a land girl, posted here, not a traveller like our gang. She's from up north somewhere. Husband killed in France, then her daughter died in ear raids. She doesn't talk, can't do anything about it. Maggie's all right, though." Her voice suddenly rode to a bellow. "I said Maggie's all right and we look out for her. Did you hear me, Norman?" And stepped threateningly towards a man who was making obscene gestures at Maggie. "Dirty bastard, get out of it," called the woman at the fire, brandishing a steaming kettle in her gloved hand. "Get out of it, you. Get some of this, pig." The man stalked off and busied himself with the weigh scale. Someone grinned at Rosie. Norman's the farmer's own employee, but so what? If the farmer wants his crops picked by any harvest gang, he'd better keep Norman in line. "Come on, tea's ready." Beneath the branches of an oak, 2 railroad cars had been set up on blocks with straw bales and sacks for bedding. A man wearing a sack apron scraped mud from the wicker baskets and stacked them. Another winked as he handed over his empty basket. "Hey, Arthur, have you got a drop of anything after a hard day?" "Not till he's cleared off," Arthur replied quietly, pointing his head towards the man, handing out cash and bottles of beer to workers waiting in line. Later, as the sun settled behind the hedgerows, Arthur reached into the ditch behind the sleeping quarters and yelled "Catch" to Jacko, and a clear glass bottle cartwheeled slowly through the air. Jacko caught it and peered. "Water?" Someone cheered. "Oh yes, that's water, the water of life. Not the boys, though, men's drink," cautioned one of the women. "You ladies from the barges, would you like a drop?" "Thanks, but no thanks. A bite to eat and then we're off to our barge," said Rosie. Potatoes hissed and popped and baked, and slices of sugar beet roasted over the flames. Rosie went back to the barge to bring bread and a can of beans and a small pan for Jacko to heat them in, and they sat on sacks and hugged their knees and stared into the flames. "This is super, isn't it, Mum?" Small group began to play cards, betting their new cash. Dan Hillier said, "Here," and slipped 2 squares of chocolate to Rosie and Joan. Rosie grinned. "You old devil, where did you get hold of this? There's none around anymore." Dan said, "I swapped my cheese for it at the docks. I can't eat cheese, see, stomach's no good. There's always somebody wants the thing that you don't want. Makes the world go round, eh?" The sun had gone, and only the crackle of the dying fires and the mutter of men over their pipes could be heard. "Bed," said Rosie, "so we can be up bright and early. London, here we come with your never-ending bloody coal. Should be nice tomorrow, though. Red sky at night, shepherd's delight." Joan cackled. "That's more likely air raids over on Coventry. Come on, Dan Hillier, you're half asleep already. Don't want you falling in the canal." The swish of an otter chasing fish startled moorhen on the canal bank. Slow breathing filled Rosie and Jacko's small worn cabin, and the moon rose stealthily over Oxfordshire. Go on.
Beautiful. David, I know I've said it before, but you have that capacity to create that whole world so deftly and quickly, and we enter into it. That
A fake English teacher.
wonderful. All right.
I used to, because I grew up on the farm, so the work gangs would come round and you have to pay them cash at the end of every day, or they wouldn't turn up. And you paid the cash, and then within 5 minutes they'd be gambling. And they'd be broke before they got home. Come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Beautiful. Lovely. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to Germany now.
Oh, wait.
I'm right there. Yes, Leslie Alejandro Bronskowski is patiently waiting in the middle of the night to read to us. So I'm grateful that you stayed up and did that. What are you going to share with us tonight, Leslie?
Well, this is another one of my memories. Oh, I don't know when's the horse. One of my memories from way back then. It really needs to be rewritten. I just was putting it together from my diary, which I found from back then. It was the summer that I met Kathy in camp. She was counselor and I was a camper. Okay, I hope my voice lasts. I have discovered poetry. With words I can describe how I am feeling. Paint a picture of myself, of happiness, of pain, of loneliness. I can mix the words like colors and try again and again until the picture is right, until I find the right words to say what I want others to feel. For this, I have all the time in the world. One of my hall counselors at camp, Kathy, comes to my room to share her poems with me. She has been watching me, she says, and sees that I hold back my words. I let others speak for me. She wears a cowboy hat and is different from the other counselors. She says I need to write poetry, to let the fear out and find the words to express what I am feeling inside. She writes about her commitment, about how she wants to make the land she is standing on sacred. I have never heard such words before. We sit for a long time together and listen to each other. I listen to her talk about being shy at school and not knowing what to say to people. I listen when she tells me that she does not have many friends, that she likes to study and read, that she was the best in her class and doesn't care what people think about her. In the evenings, when the lights are out, I write my first poem in my diary by flashlight. I remember my dream about Ganny's house. I run to the back door to find the stairwell, which hid a treasure under the floorboards. This time it is there, the stairwell of my dreams. I carefully pull up the floorboards to see what is underneath. I have always thought that if I find this treasure, I will have the answer to my question. I will know who I am and where I belong. but there is no treasure under the floorboards. The space I have always sought is empty and dark, full of dust and dirt that have been trampled through the cracks throughout the years. I put them back into place. I understand now that I will never find a treasure in the dark hole under the floorboards. I am surprised when Kathy asked me to go with her to the campus cinema to see a Humphrey Bogart film. The film is long, and we come back later than is allowed for campers. We are happy that we are not caught. On the last day of camp, we buy a book about the life of Humphrey Bogart and tear it in half, each of us taking a half. We promise that one day we will meet again and exchange the halves. Kathy gives me a copy of the poem that she wrote for me. I tell her that I will treasure it forever.
Beautiful. Okay. All right, Kathleen, are you crying yet? Beautiful memories. And writing that first poem by flashlight, lovely, lovely. And good to see Kathleen, you know, she had that spunk even when she was younger. She didn't care if she was academic or not. Fabulous. Thanks for sharing that memory and that piece of your diary.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to come back into Char's Landing now, and Robbie Van is going to share some wordsmithing with us. Good to have you back, Robbie.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to slide that up there. She's an old pro. Yeah. Yeah, there we go.
Good evening.
Evening.
I have, when writing, there are times when I get woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning with poetry running through my head, and I have to get up and write. It can be both annoying and riveting at the same time, because you really do want to go back to sleep, but still it just won't stop. My first piece when I came out of the closet was 6 verses of this amazing song, which I will not share with you this evening, but it just brought me to the point where I was crying while I was writing it because it was so meaningful for me. So as I went forward through the last 15 years of writing, I do get the pull, and I have to get up and write. And as artists, we always have to follow our souls, don't we? So I wrote this about 2 or 3 weeks ago. In human bondage, I am restrained, the wild in me, the truth untamed. Spirit guides me, sometimes I'm lost. Music's my passion, and this love has a cost. Surely sole survivor, when tossed upon the seas, think themselves a living shell, calling out, why me? I've seen the ones undone by hate while searching for hallowed ground. I thank my God with all I am, for look at what I've found. The mirror has 2 faces, while going other places, and no one sees the artist's inner eye. We are all of life in tangles, in our skirts and heels and bangles, or the glamour of it all can't be denied. The camera smiles, the photo ops. It's all a flash, a touch, a crop. Fame and fortune calls your name when you get your wish and they know your name. There's no script for life. You just try your luck. Sometimes you win and sometimes you're plucked. And the real, I can't bear it, but still I go on. The depression I've lived through while writing this song. In human bondage, I'm restrained, the wild in me, the truth untamed. The spirit guides me, for sometimes I'm lost. Music's my passion, and my love has a cost. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, I'm also a musician, which is part of the poet, I guess. And I get these flashes, and when I came to Parksville, and I was writing, a hermit that I was, I didn't go out very much, and I let the spirit move me. And one day I saw this image in my mind, and I had to write about it. Calling all angels to the shadow of all. Light up the darkness, our backs against the wall. It's time for confession. Let's measure out the toll. It's the karmic scales of justice that are keepers of the soul. Electric buzz and ozone spark, scatterhead pod boys, skater parks, splish and splatter, collars in a can. All the pretty boys go running for the man. A bottle is a ting, a huff from the bag, a puff in the alleyway suits the old hag. Corner boys are hustling, working out a deal. Business is a ripoff, always cops a feel. Crack whores and politicians party in the night, so rich, no jail, naked in the light. The poor from the puppeteer, we do the poor man's jig. The learned counsel does a line. The judge enjoys a swig. Sizzle in a copper pan, bacon in a pen. Misery from money meat supports the future's men. Slaughtered, butchered, bred and bound, our death is now on sale. The legacy of Barbary truly has no scale. The pitter, the patter, the little puffs of rain, the fluffing of the pillow, the sweet release of pain, the urgent calls, the strident bells, the squeak of nurses' heels. It's the end of the time, the end of the line, and the devil's in the deals. Angels, not innocence, protects the wayward child. Debts and sins and faults not theirs, angered, hurt, and wild. The burdens of a battered youth, indentured by its birth, slave to its meager existence. The needle knows its worth. Dungeons and dragons, a hell house of man. Franken me oily and fill me with spam. Place me in prison, slop from a pail. Drink from the cesspool, for the world is on sale. Calling all angels to the shadow of war. Light up the darkness, our backs against the wall. Time for confession, let's measure out the toll. It's the karmic scales of justice that are keepers of the soul. I've got one more, and this is called Under the Mushroom Tree, and it's about my inability to see why some laws are there and why we are prosecuted for using nature's gifts. Under the mushroom tree where the jelly bellies grow, then the piggly wigglies waddle by, and they do so in a row. As a bogleberry bush sheds its big gibbled baby leaves, you'll find little Jammy Jenny and her big knobbly knees. Now Jammy's in her jammies as a moggle swoggle cried, and she didn't hear the bangleberry blood-red beating side, and the billy blues in black and white with a fiery crimson dome took Jammy Jenny and Bugly Babe to a platin miser's home. Now the bogleberry bush is looking mighty bare and sparse, and there's quiet in the jangle-tangled sweetest house at last, and there's no more mushroom trees allowed to grow on people's lawns. They poison, trap the dreams away. Now it's politics, wars, and laws. Down came the muggle wop, guilty from the muck-a-muck. Throw the bandy blokes to bake, a file is locked inside the cake. Now Jammy Jenny grew to be a jammy jungle Jane, fighting for survival. She bit and fought and trained. She's a rebel of the system, and peace is her reward. For she found herself a mushroom grove, and oh how Jammy scored. Well, the bogleberry bush and the willy whacker weed, the tangled taste of sunny days, sweetie pie with hybrid seed, the sticky paste with now to waste in the belly the bong of sea. It's all away for the fashion days in the valley of the mushroom tree. It's all away for a tangled day in the valley of the mushroom tree. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robbie. Thank you for that. That was lovely. And bringing it full circle from Bill's Blackberry, you got us back into the patch at the end there. It's perfect. Okay. All right. I'm going to share a few poems and then we'll wrap it up for the evening. And I just wanted to share with Karen something off the chat because otherwise you might not get to see it. So Bill sent a little note saying, Karen, I love the vivid language, the weaving of your words, very descriptive, emotional, beautiful. And that was followed by Atma saying, such beautiful, engaging writing. So put those feathers in your cap. I didn't put these in a larger font, so hopefully with my glasses, I can still read them. Oh yeah, all good. I can see them now. All right, so this one's it's called Diversity. Saw a headline the other day that said Growler bear hybrids in Northwest Territories all trace back to same strange female polar bear. It started me thinking, this is how it all starts. One rogue polar bear with a thing for Grizz. Maybe she liked his hump, or was it the primal pull of, forgive me, polar opposites, the sheened allure of his dark fur in the Arctic sun, the rakish way he pawed over a boulder on the bald tundra, or the unnatural length of his omnivore claws. Or maybe it was a pity fuck for the poor dark stranger who would have nowhere to hide his dark ass in the coming snow, let alone any hope of sneaking up on a seal. And for him, perhaps he fell for her casual glance, the flicker of curiosity that said, you don't come here often, a pickup line if ever there was one, the promise of some small comfort after days roaming a treeless world. Whatever the prelude, I can see them knee-deep in the Kinnickinnick, rutting and grunting in the waning light of fall, a perfect yin-yang ball of furred pleasure, a symbol of nature's purest intent to create something new, something holy and different. And as many of you know, we just finished building our new house, and I was in awe watching these contractors do their work and how effortlessly they seem to do it and how hard it is for me to do anything of what they did. It's called construction collage. Amidst worry and wonder, our house sprouted from a hole scraped in the ground to footings christened by a newborn fawn birthed in the corner poured the day before below where now we sleep. Traces of blood dotted every room, the nicks from jagged tin trims and shim slivers plucked free with pliers. In the walls, the snipped bits of copper wire, and everywhere the skiff of drywall dust. Vicki, you know what that's about. And in our memories stamped the silhouette of Zach perched astride a wall, guiding the craned bundle of trusses home, the wiry borders balancing 12-foot sheets of gyprock on one shoulder, a screw-loaded drill in their free hands. In the air, the painter's playlist echoes, calling all angels to those work-worn hands, the brush strokes clean as angels' wings, the plumber's pecs crimped free of leaks and funneling cold water to our thirsty mouths. Behind the gypsum's eggshell sheen, I see the network of circuits strung from room to room, recall the first time we saw our house alight at night. No wonder they're called journeymen, these masters of the days of work and hands, who know the long road from broken ground to housewarming, whose hammer whams and screeching saws kept time all the drought summer. We think of them now as we ready for bed, our builder lost to his next home, our little family settling in as proud as if we built this house ourselves. Thank you. And this self-explanatory, the owl's gift. We live on a hill of thistles just beyond the city's reach, embraced by open-armed fir, the gossiping wind, our closest neighbor. All spring we conversed with the articulate rain. It spoke so many languages. We lost track of how many ways it can say you are loved. Now ravens ride updrafts in the lazy heat, showboating with barrel rolls, then dropping their chuckle clucks in the afternoon's ear. In the still evening, only the whipping of their wings to crease the silence. A barred owl lights in the alder tree below our deck, observes us the way a small child stares without apology, then soars off, leaving a question hanging in the hush of dusk. What if the only thing between us and wholeness is the belief that we're not? For a few moments of purple twilight, every rock and thistle looks back at me with my eyes. And then finally, I'll dedicate this one to you, Bob. It's called The Real Reset. Let's say goodbye to the capitalist trap that kept the fat cats fat and the rest of the world flat. Forget the trickle-down facade that never seeped down to the masses. Let's give the finger to the upper classes, or better yet, let's kick their asses out of power, tear down the towers, forgive our debts and reclaim the hours spent bent over backwards, trying to please those ruthless masters with their greedy fingers on the strings, the leeches bleeding us to buy their bling, the moneylenders stashing money overseas, the corporate crooks who cook the books and end each fiscal year tax-free. The governments who start the sparks and spill our children's blood for nada, their palaces fenced with severed heads like Kurtz or Baba Yaga. Oh, the walls are falling around us now. The sacred cows of Adam Smith are destined to collapse, erase the borders, share the spoils, and the tyranny of gas and oil, dismiss their dismal future to the past. Ignore the loudspeakers of war who broadcast lies to create friction. Embrace a vision of the world united by compassion. Without that, the future looms like a blowout sail that's coming soon, but first the ashes, first the doom, then the market's gone kaboom. No need for Nostradamus. I can feel it in the room. We watch our breath. We taste the death and hear the horn. We wait patiently to see what unpredicted beauty will be born. Sure.
Marvelous, marvelous.
Thank you, thank you.
Is that in print? Is that in print somewhere? Can I get that in print?
I'll send you a copy, David.
Please, 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 yes.
Thank you. All right, well, that ends another fabulous night here at the Electric Mermaid, and just congratulations to everyone who read, and thank you so much for sharing your gifts with us. And thank you especially to Karen Hofmann, our featured reader, for
Yes.
some of her books. That was wonderful. Another round of applause for her. And thank you, of course, to Char for hosting us and surviving with that broken foot.
Yes, hey.
Keeping things on track. Karl keeping us on track as well over there in the
Yeah.
reader's seat. Sheila back at the bar, keeping us fed and watered. Thank you, Sheila. Where did she go? Oh, she's over there. Okay. All right. So next month we've got Barbara Black is going to be with us, another well-established author. It's going to be very entertaining and exciting, I'm sure. So make sure you tune in for next week. And in the meantime, keep writing, stay healthy, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you in July.
And thank you to Derek.
Take care.
No,
Yes, thank you, Derek.
Say hi to Keisha.
Yeah.
Hi
Hi,
to
Leslie.
Wonderful.
Go to sleep now. You're already asleep.
No, I'm going back to bed. Today I don't have to move.
Good idea.
you should go back. It'd be nice to go back to bed. I may have to do that at one point, but it's too early to go to bed here. I'll wake
Yeah.
up too early.
Bye. Wow. Okay. I hope you get your flight sometime there, Karl.
So everything works out too. I'm like, no.
Oh, well.
But so far so good. So I mean, it's a week away, so I haven't got the email yet. So
Now.
I'll say
Hi.
hello. Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
And I love the story, Leslie's story about the meeting at camp, and then you split the book in half.
Where's the book?
So you did meet again, and
We switched the halves back.
yeah,
Yes.
that's awesome.
I didn't know
I was
that.
wondering who read the second half of the book first, right?
I think I did, but I can't remember. Did I read the first? I got
I
the
don't
second.
remember anymore. Isn't that terrible?
Anyways, I enjoyed that. I got to run, but,
Yeah.
but good to see you guys.
Oh,
Walk.
don't run. Don't
Walk.
run.
I know.
Walk.
I got
Be
a hobble. Okay,
All right.
take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.